Hello, everyone. Welcome to our class. Right now, we'll be talking about the chapter 6 of the book A Manual for Preaching by Abraham Kuruvilla. The title is Illustrating Ideas. So we've gone through a lot, and right now we're going to put in some illustrations. So what are the principles we need to learn about it? So let's start it. I'll be showing to you the PowerPoint, Illustrating Ideas. Slideshow. Okay. So what are the functions of illustrations? Number one is to clarify. Well, the verb illustrate comes from the Latin lustrare, which is to make bright. So that's why we're using illustrations, because we want to clarify things, to brighten things up, to make it clear to them what do we really mean. And then another function is to convince. You can use statistics, personal story that people can relate. In that way, it's easier to convince if they have experienced the same thing. So that is what we call illustration also. The testimonies are personal experiences. Another function is to concretize. It's kind of similar with clarify. It's making things real, visible, and near, to the point of going to the details. So that means through your words, you are making it real to them or visual to them. So concretize. And lastly, to captivate. It is to keep one's attention. I know you've been listeners in the church, and when you're hearing illustrations or stories, oh, it's getting your attention, right? But then if you keep on listening to series of, theological explanations, uh, it sounds like your mind can wander away easily. So we need to put in illustrations from time to time so that we can captivate the attention of our listeners. Of course, when we are able to captivate their attention, then we will be able also to tell them what we want them to know, our theological focus, or the theology of the pericope. We can deliver it to them clearly if we are able to captivate their attention. So this is very important. Illustrations are very important part of your manuscript or your sermon. How about emotions? Illustrations and emotions. Illustrations work more by evoking emotion than by engaging reason. The ancient called this presence. So, okay, we explain and that's engaging reason, right? But when we use illustrations, oftentimes we evoke emotion. And when we do that, the more that people can relate, the more the people's life can be touched or their hearts can be touched. So emotions will ensure just as if we were present at the event itself by Cantillon. So in the way you deliver the illustrations or the story, it seems like they're there. So you want to make sure that they're experiencing it at the same time while you're telling the story. So the old paradigm held an ideal reason freed of the pool of emotion. The new paradigm urges us to harmonize head and heart. This by Daniel Goleman. Now, how do we do that? Speak with pathos or passion. And it is also one way to persuade. You know it for yourself when you are so passionate about it and you put in there a lot of emotions when you're very passionate in sharing a particular thing or a particular story. So we need that. We need that as we deliver the illustrations. We need to put in or blend in or harmonize head and heart, emotions, and the content. What are the types of illustrations? Number one is narration, stories of different kinds, shapes, colors, fact or fiction, parables, hypothetical narrations, questions. Those are called narration. Okay, so whatever stories is that, whether it is real story or it's fiction, we call it narration. Okay. Now, narratives that work well as illustrations are about people and success and are proximal to the audience, meaning they can relate without difficulty. So you need to really know who your audience is before you create or put in there a certain illustration. Remember that. Don't just, oh, this is a good illustration, but they cannot relate on it. But still, you put it there because you think it's good. Na parang ikaw lang ang nakaka-relate. So sometimes we're like that. We get illustrations from, in the internet, and oftentimes there are illustrations that are for US, not in the Philippines. So when you share it here in the Philippine context, what is that? They cannot grasp it. So please be careful. Make sure you know your audience before choosing an illustration. And yes, remember that they love to hear about people and their success, and also current issues. I think this is also a critical reminder to us to always check on the news. Check on the news, and then if this is the news that is always there, then you can also use that in your illustrations. With that, you will get their attention and it can make things relatable to them. Starts with a story is told, yeah, for narration. Suppose it is nighttime and you come to the scene of accident. So this is what we call the hypothetical questions. It is also under the narration type of illustration. Let's say you are the bride's father. Yeah. So those are hypothetical questions. So if a story is not true, remember this, please don't tell it as if it is or as if it happened to you. Because it sounds like deceiving them, I know. So if it's not true, let them know and don't make it that it happened to you. You can also take on the role of the characters in a narrative pericope. For example, you copy the voice of God. For example, God is talking to Cain. Where is your brother? Something like that. And then Cain said, I'm my brother's keeper. Something like that. So you're being a storyteller. You can take the role of the characters, yeah, in the story or in the narrative. Now, the next type of illustration is called confession. Now, this is kind of personal. It may take a form of story, but it is personal. You lived it. You can describe it vividly. It's about your confession. Parang after learning about this theology or this theological focus, and then you confess to them that I have been into this kind of situation also. In a way that I worry too much one day, like that, like that, like that. So you can describe it vividly. It's kind of confession coming from you. So confessions are best when they show the confessor in a dim light, a victim of the event recounted. This shows vulnerability and helps to humanize the preacher. So let us let them know that we're also humans. We are not superheroes here, or we are not perfect. We can also do this. We can confess. That's part of illustration when we do confession. It's being human, It's called tactful self-disclosure. And so in illustration, you need to remember that you should refrain from boasting. Or yeah, stop boasting. Don't do that in the pulpit. You would drive away their attention from you and even to the message. Listeners' imaginations are the best props to use in a sermon. Stroke their imaginations with pictures that you paint with words. Oftentimes in illustrations, we want to use some props like that, but then the author is encouraging us to no need to use some props. Just say with words what you want them to picture in their imagination. Next, some ideas pa. There needs to be some tension in a story you tell. like suspense, intrigue, danger, puzzlement, curiosity, and so on. But don't overburden the listeners with unnecessary information. So when you tell stories, there must be tension, so that it will be interesting. It will be something like, I want to listen to this. I want to hear this. Why is it like that? Something like that. So you will arouse in their mind curiosity, or something like, oh, what's that? What's next? I want to listen to that. But then do not overburden them, especially with a lot of information that is not needed, or that's it's not related anymore to the topic. So some kind of neat ending, a resolution is always necessary. Yeah, don't keep them hanging. There must always be an ending. For example, I give them an illustration that there is a man who climbed up the mountain, and then he fell on a cliff. But then thankfully, there's a branch of a tree hanging there. So he hold on to that tree, and then after some hours, he is so tired, and then he asked, "Anybody there? Can anyone help me?" And then a voice said, "Yes, please, parang jump out, or parang jump, or stop holding on that tree," sabi ng voice. And then the man said, "Is there anyone else?" Meaning he doesn't want to believe the voice that is talking to him to lift up that branch and jump. And then after saying that, in the of course, if I won't say the end, it will leave them hanging. So at the end, I told them that the next day, when the sun is shining bright already, he looked down, was still holding on that branch, and he saw that he is just 1 feet away from the ground. And that's the end of the story. So that's the way you share a story. There's suspense, there's something like intrigue, curiosity, and then you end it. Make sure that you will have a resolution and ending to that. So the lesson there is that you should have listened to the voice of God, because He knows what is best. Recommendation: watch professional storytellers. What stories they used to tell and how. We have some preachers who are very good storytellers, like David Asherek, I think Taj Paklag also, and who else? I think Dog Bachelor also loves to use illustrations. So please watch them. Um, See how they do it and what are their illustrations. How do they tell it also? You would learn from them. So try out your storytelling skills on others also in one-on-one conversation or in non-pulpit speaking situations. Yeah, so every day you can do this. You can practice. Just have a friend and then start telling him a story. So that's also how you would tell it in the pulpit. Now, what else are the types of illustrations? After narration, confession, we have enumeration. The use of statistics as illustrations, yun yung enumeration. Then it's have to be concise and compact. You need to round off or use percentages. Keep track of sources of your statistics. Ensure accuracy or the respectability of the source. For example, 98% of the Seventh-day Adventists nowadays are reading their Bibles, hopefully, no? Example is 99% good enough. Is 99% good enough? What do you think? That would mean medical errors killing 4,000 people each year. Wow, so it seems like 99% is not good, because 4,000 is a lot of people. And power outages for 14 plus minutes every day. Whoa, so 99% isn't good enough. That's why when we render something to the Lord, it must be 100%, our all. We render everything to God. Quotation, the other type of illustration is number 4, quotation, often employed with good effect to illustrate a concept or to emphasize a point. You can use surprising sources than the usual. the usual, William Shakespeare, Winston Churchill. But of course, for us Seventh-day Adventists, oftentimes we use Ellen G. White quotations, right? So this is also used as part of illustrations because oftentimes Ellen G. White quotations would enlighten us more, would give us more practical applications of the idea. So that's the part of the Ellen G. White quotes. As part of the illustrations, trying to clarify more, convince more. What else? The letter C's. Yeah, so those things, you know. So make sure you quote it accurately. If you don't know who said it, you can say an old philosopher once said, or somebody once told me about. Okay, so quote accurately. What else? Number 5, exemplification includes all other kinds of illustrations that serve as examples of a notion you are trying to convey. This might include definitions, your own or from the dictionary. So exemplification yung tawag doon when you use definitions. There are also analogies. For example, pictures are like footballs. That's called exemplification. Ano? A cartoon being read or said also, not just being shown on the screen. Lists are good too. Did you know that the biggest fear of all Americans is public speaking? That is number 7, with fear of heights, etc. in between. So these are called exemplification. Now, I won't let you identify what illustrations did you use, but I'm just giving you ideas that, hey, these are possible illustrations. I can just put this one in. So I'm just giving you a wider scope of kinds of illustration that you can probably use. And number 6, visualization. The use of what are commonly called props. So I told you this one earlier. Handouts, projected slides, audio, video, physical objects, etc. So even the video that we insert or the music we do insert in our sermons, we call this illustrations or part of the type visualization. Now, the most common and efficient that is recommended by the author is giving out handouts. That means they will have something that they can go home with, meaning the outline of your sermon or the verses that they need to remember. So this is one thing that he usually uses. What with regard to projected slides or PowerPoint, we can actually do away with this if we have good words describing what we want to describe. If we know how to give emphasis to the key points that we want to share. So if you don't have PowerPoint, that's fine. It's just that you need to really know how to deliver it properly. But make sure to still have oral clarity. So that's the idea, oral clarity, rather than just relying to the props to illustrate. So the thing is, you can use these props, but yeah, make sure you have oral clarity. You can use props, but then still make sure that you don't go away or farther away from what you want to point out. The author discourages the use of props or visualizations as to let imaginations work and keep the listeners away from distractions. But sometimes it's very needful if the audience cannot really, create it in their mind or cannot really imagine it. And then maybe that's the time that we can show some pictures or examples or props from it. But if we can, use our words so that they can use their imagination to visualize it, that will still be the best. So know your audience. Remember that in using illustrations, one illustration per move is sufficient. Oftentimes you want, oh, this is a good illustration. Oh, this is another good illustration. There's 3 illustrations in one point or in one move. It's a lot. we can use just one illustration per move. It will be very sufficient, especially if we choose it carefully. So make sure illustrations are crisp, meaning there is a resolution to it. It's yummy or complete, something like that. You just have the, the necessary words in it, and then make sure it's appropriate, make sure it's relevant, and make sure it's helpful. So try your best to write them in the manuscript to be more effective. Remember this. Oftentimes we don't want to write down the illustrations anymore in the outline because we thought we really know how to tell the story. But then if we wrote them, we will be delivering it efficiently, effectively, and the best because we already have chosen the words to deliver the right message to them. So I hope you can try, and you will always try to write down the story or the illustrations in your manuscript. Avoid using Bible stories as illustrations. This is one thing you need to remember, since they have a different theological thrust or force and will need you to introduce each characters. For those congregations wherein you know that all of them knows the Bible stories already, then probably you can use some of the Bible stories as illustrations. But then oftentimes when we preach on a Sabbath and there are some listeners who are, they're not familiar with the Bible stories, if you would use it as an illustration, it's kind of hard for them to figure it out. Who is that one? What is that story about? So another thing is that you won't be true to the theological thrust of that pericope or of that story if you would use it as an illustration to your move or to your point. So he has a point that we don't need to use Bible stories as an illustration. We just need to use other stories as illustrations. So how can you find or organize illustrations? They're also what we call canned illustrations. They are not advisable. Those you pick up in compilations of anecdotes. So those canned illustrations are those you just see in Google, on some website na nakalista na doon yung mga illustrations na yun. Well, this is not advisable because sometimes it's not relatable. Sometimes it's not in our Filipino context. Now, you need to discover illustrations as you observe life. Okay, so as you observe life. In your daily life, you would realize, oh, this is a good illustration. As you look into the nature, as you study some, things in nature, you will also realize, oh, we can learn something from this one. And then you can use it as an illustration. Read widely. Be alert for illustrative material. Take interest in the horizons, interests, and hobbies of those in your congregation. Ask to be taught, learn well, and remember. So these are the things that you need to do. You need to know what is happening to your audience or to your members so that you can use some of those things related to them as illustrations. Have an archive for possible illustrations you found. So the idea is collect, and collect. Now, even the author is having a hard time how to organize the illustrations he had stored or collected. So it's up to you. How do you organize it? Oftentimes, you make it topical. Like for example, this is about salvation. So maybe in your laptop or in your Google Drive, you have a folder there, salvation, and then put there all the illustrations you can find or you have encountered in that folder. So try to collect and collect, illustrations that you encounter. Now, another and last part of this lecture is using humor. It's also important. Sometimes you thought, oh, we shouldn't be, humorous in front or in the pulpit. Now, here's a reason to use humor: reducing potential tension. Oftentimes, you might look stern, but if you have some humor at the beginning or in the along your message, then it reduces tension. They will be more comfortable listening to you. It also dismantling listeners' defenses. Oftentimes they're defensive, but then if they hear some humors from you, then it might be removed, enabling an entry into topics that otherwise may be a taboo. That's another thing. There's some taboo in different cultures, but if you are, clever enough and you can be humorous and enable you to enter those topics without being offensive. It also showing yourself as human, not taking yourself too seriously, inculcating a sense of joy and celebration, fostering a sense of community in listeners as they laugh together, and even increase your own credibility. So sometimes we cannot see this as function or reason to use humor, but yes, these are the reasons. Now, cheerfulness is always to be aimed for. So I really appreciate those who are preaching with happiness in their hearts and on their faces. It's very important because you're gonna give them hope. So how do you give them hope? By having an angry face. So you should also be cheerful. And then watching stand-up comedy can be helpful to adopt the strategies. You can also try that. But then oftentimes, the stand-up comedians meron sila mga green jokes, but then try to look for the wholesome ones and then learn from them. No off-color remarks, no offensive language, no sarcasm, no belittling of another's religion, ethnicity, gender, race, nation, political viewpoint, or hair color. So let's be careful on this. Whenever we say something na we thought it's humorous, let's be careful not to be offensive to anyone. Okay, let's just be tactful at the same time with sense of humor. So when in doubt, drop it out. Remember that. And then self-deprecation is actually the best and safest kind of humor. One time my brother-in-law preached, he said, when my sister saw him, he looks like John Lloyd. But then after some few years, when my sister tell him now that he looks like Chan Lloyd because he already have quite a big tummy, something like that. So it's called self-deprecation because he's not boasting. Is there anyone boasting for a bigger tummy? So it's actually self-deprecation, but then it's kind of real humorous, It's kind of funny. So you can use humor. You can use humor, guys. So that's it for the illustrations. I hope that you can now easily input illustrations in your sermons, putting in mind that these illustrations will be relatable to your audience and will be very effective and at the same time efficient in terms of its relatedness to your message or to your key point. So may God bless you guys and see you again next time.